Hello, welcome back to part 2, Eco 501, week 2, sections 1 and 2. In the part 1, we discussed what we discussed in the previous week and also some code of conduct and the definition of economics. In this part, we're going to look at the 5 concepts that we just briefly mentioned in week 1. Let me go to the slides now. So the 5 concepts that we mentioned at the beginning, sometime in week 1 were: number 1, trade-offs, which was defined as because of scarcity, if we decide to do more of, say, X now, we sacrifice doing Y in future or forever. The first keyword, like we said in the previous part, that we want to identify the keywords and then link them to make a meaningful sentence. Because of scarcity, that means we need to know what scarcity is. Then we have to assume that, yes, this is the fundamental assumption. This is the starting assumption that, yes, scarcity is in the picture. Because of scarcity, we cannot choose X and Y together. If we make a decision to choose X, then we sacrifice Y. We will get into details a little bit later. The second concept that we need to be clear about is incentives. How does the environment in which firms operate influence what they will do or won't do? We can also think about households. I think we should write it now. Okay. So the environment that households and firms find themselves in, what makes them do something, i.e. an incentive to do something, what makes them not to do something. That means they find a disincentive in doing it. We'll get into this in detail a little bit later. Number 3 concept is exchange. Exchange is nothing but something moving from A to B, from one individual to another. How will it move from one individual to another? What are its consequences? We'll look at a little bit later. The 4th concept is information. What role does information play in making decisions? We'll look at that in detail later. Finally, this is not going to be covered in detail, but we will make a little bit of mentioning since it's in your text. How is wealth affected by choices made? Distribution shall not be discussed in this course, as I said. So let's start with the first concept, trade-off. Okay, the foundation of any choice is scarcity. There's 3 dimensions of scarcity. There's more, but these 3 are the 3 dimensions that we will be using in our course. Number 1, resources are limited. Number 2, technology or the know-how is also limited. Number 3, our time is limited. In the discussion class, I'm going to elaborate on these 3. What do we mean by limited resources? What do we mean by technology? What do we mean by time? For the moment, let's assume that resources are unlimited. We're on an island. Okay, the island, there's no other person on an island, it's only myself. So everything on that island belongs to me. So I have all the resources of the island that can satisfy me for the rest of my life. But I don't have infinite amount of time within which to consume that. There's many things on the island. Some things I may like, other things I may not like. So you see, the choices are slowly becoming limited now. Once choices become limited, then we have to make a decision on which one to take and which not to take. Now there's 2 choices, X and Y. Before we make a decision, both of them are available to us. Let's assume X is Pepsi Cola and Y is Coca-Cola. We haven't decided which one to take, but before we make the choice, both of them are available to us. Our income is limited, i.e. our resources. So within the resources that we have and also the time that we've been given, then what will happen? we can consume only one of the two. Either we consume Pepsi, X, or we consume Coca-Cola. We can't consume both at the same time. So how do we make a choice? If we choose X over Y, Pepsi over Coca-Cola, we make a trade-off. A trade-off is just another technical term for sacrifice. We choose X, that means we sacrifice Y. We don't take Y because our budget won't allow it, okay? This trade-off concept is also known as opportunity cost. We compare X and Y when both are available. If we see X is greater than Y, over here, we've written it mathematically, but we are going to try to interpret this X greater than Y intuitively. That means X, for whatever reason, is better than Y in my eyes, because I'm making the decision. So I choose X over Y. If I saw the opposite, Y is better than X, then I would have chosen Y. Okay? The trade-off, we sacrifice Y for X. Alternatively, the cost of the opportunity to choose X is the cost of sacrificing Y. If we want to use the technical term, opportunity cost. Otherwise, it's just a trade-off. Think about some examples. We'll think about examples in class. Now, in the previous slide, we said that there were two options in front of us, X and Y, Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola. In the real world, we may have more than two options in front of us. Let's give an example in the context of your class. Before you decided to do a master's at Brack University, you had, say, three options, A, B, and C. Since you haven't made a choice and you qualify for any of the three, you can choose any of the three. Okay? But you cannot choose three at the same time. Why? Let's go back to the time concept. Even if you have the capacity to choose any one of the three, you cannot choose A, B, C at the same time, because you cannot be at three places at the same time if the classes happen at the same time. So you have to choose only one. When we choose, we psychologically or based on some quantifiable evidence, we rank the options. Now look, we have used the word, why are we ranking over here? Okay, why are we ranking? Or what is the purpose of ranking? When we rank, we put the top on the first and the bottom at the last. This type of ranking is going in descending order. That means we are identifying our first best, second best, third best, etc. We can also rank in the opposite direction, ranking the worst first and the highest amount later. Okay, so in that case, we're just doing the reverse. But normally what we do, we try to find out which one is our best choice, and we choose that best choice. Why do we expect that the decision maker is going to choose the best choice? If the decision maker did not choose the best choice, then he is not optimizing the environment that he's finding himself in. If he does not make the best choice, he is not optimizing the environment he's finding himself in. So one of the assumptions is our decision maker will try to make the best choice. Okay. Then our ranking is BAC. We've done BAC because we are studying at Brack University and we've decided to not study at the University A, whatever the name is, or University C, whatever the name is. So what is the opportunity cost? The opportunity cost is the next best alternative that we sacrificed. Next best alternative that we sacrificed. So in our ranking, we had B, A, C. We chose B. The next one that we didn't choose was A. So A is the opportunity cost of choosing B. If somebody's ranking was B, C, A, and they chose B, then the opportunity cost would have been C for choosing B. Next best alternative. Now the question is, why are we using the concept of next best alternative? Because in the real world, we may not have only two choices. That, okay, I chose X, Y was the other one, so Y must be the opportunity cost. In the real world, there will be more than two. Like in this case, there were three options. If there were four options, A, B, C, D, maybe our ranking would have been B, D, A, B, D, A, C. So we chose B. The next best alternative was D. So D is the opportunity cost of choosing B. The next best alternative. Okay, now we come across this concept, sunk cost. Before we made the decision, okay, all the options were available in front of us. Brack University and any other university that we could have qualified to. Okay. Once we've made the choice, once we've committed that we are coming to Brack University, then options A and C don't no longer exist. So the decision, once it has been made, it's gone forever. This is known as a sunk cost. This is what happens after a decision has been made. Now, after 2 semesters of staying in Brack University, you will realize whether your choice was good or bad. In our model assumes once you've made the choice, you can't look back. We will look at examples of what this means and why. Before making a decision, we have to be very, very careful. We will look at examples during the class. Okay. The next concept was incentives. The second concept, incentives, means how choices are influenced by changing environments. How choices are influenced by changing environments. From the opposite way, when an environment changes, what effect does that have on choices? Okay. Now let's see. If the price of fuel increases, our environment has changed. How will this change influence first-time car buyers? Look, we've made it a highlight over here, first-time car buyers. So if I already have bought a car, or I already have 2 cars, then I've already made a decision in the past. So I will be less flexible than a person who has not made a decision at all. So the price of fuel increases, and this price will stay like this for, say, another 1 year or 2 years. The government has declared. So we have 2 types of people. One group have already bought a car, so they like a sunk cost. Whatever decision they took in the past has gone. They can't get out of this decision now. But there's also another group in the market who haven't bought a car. They're first-time buyers. How will they respond? They will be more flexible compared to the population that already has a car. Now, what do decision makers do? Decision makers calculate a cost and benefit. Okay, if I buy a car, what is the cost? Okay, I calculate. What are the benefits I have? If the benefit is more than the cost, I go for it. Plain and simple as that. Okay. This is known as cost benefit analysis. Now, higher fuel costs raises cost of maintaining your car. So although the price now the price of car has increased, sorry, the price of fuel has increased. I'm a first-time buyer. I haven't bought a car. Do I buy an energy efficient car, or do I buy a cheap, which consumes more energy, more fuel? So you see, even among the first-time buyers, there's another group. One group, they're making a decision, okay, that do I buy a energy efficient car, so within 1500 cc, or do I buy a car that is more than 1500 cc? So the incentives this is how changing environments will influence something that we will do. It will also influence something that we won't do. When we talk about incentives, we also naturally and obviously have to introduce the concept of disincentive, the opposite of incentive. Okay, so we define incentives that as an external environment changes, it encourages you to do something. Then the opposite is disincentive. What is disincentive? When an external environment discourages you to do something. Encourages means increase is just an up arrow. See, we're using mathematical concepts, but we're not using numerical figures or equations yet. Discourages means decrease, so it's a down arrow. If price increases, how is demand or supply affected? That means one side of the market, they find an incentive to buy more, the buyers. Sorry, if the price increases, then the buyers have an incentive to buy less. They have a disincentive, but the sellers have an incentive to sell more. The opposite will happen if the price falls. Now, the questions that we're going to ask in this course regarding incentives is, number one, under what conditions will incentive work? Number two, under what conditions will disincentive work? Number three, is there a situation when neither of the two will work? When we approach this question, we will be approaching a concept called equilibrium. We'll come to that later in the next week. Incentives or disincentives may be natural and within a system. For example, prices in a market, price increases, prices falls. Buyers and sellers respond in two different ways. Incentives or disincentives can also be external. For example, if you join an organization, you sign a contract. In the contract, it is clearly written that if you do these certain things, you will be rewarded. So you will have an incentive to get the reward. If you do this set of activities, you will be penalized. So you will have a disincentive to do those things. Unlike the price mechanism, which is a signal through which resource allocation happens, incentives and disincentives can also be imposed through an external system. For example, over here in a contract. In the discussion class, we're going to look at some examples. Now, exchange, as we said in the beginning of the definition, exchange is nothing but when a good X moves from A to B. Okay. Exchange will take place in a market in our assumption. Now, what is a market? Since goods need to be exchanged, we need a formal institutional arrangement where this exchange will happen. This exchange will happen in a market. A market is an institutional arrangement where buyers and sellers meet. Why are we so obsessed with the market setting? Because in a market setting, another thing happens. When many buyers and many sellers meet at the same time, large-scale cooperation is possible. How? For example, there's a fish market. So lots of fish sellers come to this place. Lots of fish buyers come to this place. So automatically a coordination is possible. Automatically a cooperation is happening between the buyers and the sellers. Okay, so the market not only allows buyers and sellers to meet to transact a good, the meeting of many buyers and many sellers allows or makes it possible for large-scale cooperation to be possible. Now, what we are going to look at is the ideal situation that the markets happen. And then we will look at these situations when market transactions can go wrong. Why did they go wrong? We ask ourselves, is there a solution to it? Then we ask this question. Second thing is, not all markets have a well-structured exchange mechanism. For example, if I want to buy a Coca-Cola, I just go to any grocery store, I go and buy. I know what the price is. The seller also knows what the price is. I give money willingly to the seller, and the seller willingly gives the Coke to me. Okay, I don't need to know the seller. the seller doesn't need to know me. This type of transaction is known as commodity markets. This is the type of markets that is normally analyzed in basic elementary economics. There's another type of market, okay, where the buyer has to know the seller and vice versa. For example, a kidney is going to be exchanged through legal means, okay, and through proper means. There will be a kidney donor and a kidney receiver. The kidney donor and the kidney receiver have to match each other, just like when we donate blood. This type of market exchange is known as matching markets. This is a concept that is quite new in economics, but a concept, even if we strip it off all the technical attributes, we can still analyze it. Okay, so some exchanges like kidneys cannot be exchanged in any market. We want to look at this type of market as well. One assumption of any market exchange is the transaction between the buyer and the seller has to be voluntary. The buyer cannot be forced into buying. The seller cannot be forced into selling. What will happen if that happens? Either this transaction will be one-sided, the buyer will be more happy than the seller, or the seller will be more happy than the buyer, or the transaction will not be optimized. That means the buyer and the seller both could have done better. So we will assume that the transaction is voluntary, okay, and so that buyers and sellers both benefit at the same time. When they both benefit at the same time, we are using the technical term mutually beneficial. Mutually means at the same time, okay? So when exchanges are not voluntary, like we say in the slide over here, then outcome will be one-sided. One will be happy, not the other. We mentioned this in the beginning class last week. Now we mention in detail. Robin Hood was notoriously famous for stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Although his intentions were noble, okay, this transaction was not voluntary. The poor were happy at the cost of the rich. A little while ago that we just said that one party is happy over the other. That means it's not mutually beneficial. Okay, both were not happy at the same time. That was both were not, did not benefit mutually. When exchange is voluntary, all parties benefit together. The social welfare is maximized. The sellers maximize their profit, buyers maximize their utility. When exchanges are voluntary, markets also solve three basic problems. What will be produced? What good will be produced? That depends on supply and demand, the available technology, the preference of the consumers. How will it be produced? This is a technical issue. So, and it's related to the firms. The firms will definitely opt for the most efficient technology available. Who gets what? That determines on who can buy the good. This is the distribution. Okay. Number 4, the fourth concept is what information sets do the transacting parties have? That means the buyer and the seller. Does one side of the market know more than the other side about the actual quality of the product? We mentioned this in the last week's class, the used car market. The owner of a car knows more about a used car than the buyer. So the information here is asymmetric. The two parties, the buyers and the sellers, have different sets of information. In this case, the seller has more information about the actual quality of the car or the used car, whatever, okay? In the insurance market, I'm a buyer of insurance, so I know whether I'm a good patient or a bad patient if I'm going to buy a health insurance, okay? The company or the insurance company that's going to sell me this information, they don't know how good I am. So over here again, the information is asymmetric. In this particular case, the buyer knows more than the seller. So asymmetric information is just that, it's not 50-50 like a normal distribution. It's 60-40, 40-60, whatever. One side knows more than the other. When information is asymmetric, resource allocation will not be efficient. This we can say this from common sense, okay? Buyers or sellers will constantly benefit more than the other party. This means the good cannot be sold, or if it is sold, it will be sold at a suboptimal level. That means further improvement could have been possible. Okay, in the presence of asymmetric information, it's very difficult for buyers or sellers to identify credibly which is the good type and which is the bad type product. In the class, I'm going to discuss this. Okay, over here, if you're looking at the video now, when there is asymmetric information, it is difficult for buyers and sellers to credibly identify that this is a good product, this is a bad product. In a competitive market, a good product will definitely command a better price. A Samsung high-end mobile will definitely be more expensive than a Samsung mid-range or low-range mobile, or a mid-range, low-range mobile of any other company. But if I cannot credibly send a signal as a seller or credibly receive a signal as a buyer that this is a good phone, then I won't have an incentive to pay a higher price. In a competitive market, if I could identify that this is a good phone, if I don't offer the seller a higher price, he's not going to give it to me. I won't get the features of it. So asymmetric information is a big problem in markets where the quality of the product cannot be credibly signaled. What's the consequence of this? The consequence of this is that bad qualities products will stay on the market. They will drive out the good quality products. In this course, we will look at why this happens, what type of solutions can we find out to solve this problem. The course will explore this phenomenon and its solutions, okay? This phenomenon is known as the lemons market. We'll discuss later on why it's called a lemons market sometime, some other week. It was introduced by George Akerlof formally in 1970 or 1971, and he won the Nobel in economics with two other people for his contribution in 2001. Distribution is something that we're not going to discuss formally, but we're going to discuss it a little bit. Just we'll pass over it, okay? Before that, let me go back to concept number 3, exchange. When goods are voluntarily exchanged in a market setting where buyers and sellers meet and nobody is forced to buy or forced to sell, then what will be produced will be determined by supply and demand. How it will be produced is a choice that the firms will make. They will try to choose the best possible technology. Who will get what is produced is determined by a person or a household's purchasing power. So if I have more purchasing power and my demand for a particular good is very high, I will buy more. I enjoy the cake more than others. Why? Because I have a market power, I have a buying power. Now, apparently this is okay, but if the good is a good, for example, like education, if the good is something like, say, health, basic education, if I have more money, I get more access to education. If somebody has less money, they either don't get any access at all or they get less access. If these type of goods, if some people cannot afford, cannot get access, that is not morally accepted by any society. Okay, so what happens is, in that case, the government will intervene. The classic example is the pandemic that we're going through. The government or the state of Bangladesh is giving these COVID vaccines for free. They're not free, for the government, but they're free for the user. Why? Because if these COVID vaccines were sold on the market, the rich people would have had access to health, the basic health, a matter of life and death. The poor people would not have. So even if it is a challenging matter for Bangladesh, it's definitely a costly affair. It is a moral responsibility of the state or the government to ensure that everybody gets free COVID-19 vaccines. So if the distribution is very unfair, then the government will intervene. For example, the government of Bangladesh has free primary education. The government of Bangladesh has free basic health care. The government of Bangladesh has lots of free services. Why are they given free? Because otherwise the distribution of wealth could be unfair. It could be something that the society is not willing to accept or see. So this brings us to the end of part 2 of our lectures for week 2. Okay, in the next part, we will look at some other things that are relevant to the course and also relevant to this particular week. So I'm stopping the share, and please do look at part number 3. That will be the last part of this week. Thank you very much. Bye.